Hello everyone, and welcome back to the kitchen table, once again smothered in boat plans. Now, after all this time of talking about months and weeks, the exciting news is that we are now just days away from when I will be in a boatyard on the Thames starting actual meaningful work on the trading wherry Lady Garnet. Now, there's been a lot that's been going on behind the scenes over the last few weeks, the less cinematic style stuff that I don't put in the videos, such as calculations of how much material I'm going to need and sending emails to timber suppliers. And I have even begun designing some Lady Garnet themed merchandise, and I will be revealing all that fairly soonish. But as I mentioned in the last video, the important thing that I need to do before January 1st is the table of offsets. And to do that, I need the plans. Now, you've seen plans before. I did quite a bit about them back in episode 2, but of course things have changed since then. Back then I was showing you the plans for the wherry Albion, which Lady Garnet was going to be based off of. However, since I have adjusted the dimensions of Lady Garnet, obviously I needed to get some new plans made. So I have redesigned them and I've taken them to our local print shop and I have printed them off. And it's quite satisfying to look at these plans and know that they're not the plans of an existing wherry that I'm just going to slightly alter, but they are the specific plans of Lady Garnet. Because what you have to remember, of course, is that a trading wherry is not a class design boat. So a class design boat, you have to buy the official plans, and at various stages throughout the build, as I know, you will have an inspector from the class association come down and make sure that you're doing everything according to the book. Wherries, well, not that way at all. Obviously, there are certain things that make a boat into a trading wherry, of course. But in terms of their dimensions, well, wherries were traditionally built by eye. And they were also designed specifically for the areas in which they were going to trade and for the kind of cargo that they were likely to carry. So, for example, the lovely wherry Cornucopia was designed with a very narrow beam so she could fit through Old Wayford Bridge on the River Ant. So now that I have the plans, the big question is, how do I go about transferring a boat shape that is this size into one that is 48 feet long? Now, before I go into that, I just want to clarify something, which is that when I talk about Lady Garnet's length as being 48 feet, that is from the stern post to the stem post. It does not include the rudder, which, as you can see, the rudder is quite substantial on a trading wherry, and also it is all astern of the actual hull. So if you were to go online and look up, for example, the wherry Albion, you would find that sometimes she is listed as being 58 foot 3 inches long, and sometimes she's listed as being 65 feet long. And that just depends on whether the site you're looking at is including her rudder in her overall dimensions. Obviously, when you are sailing the boat and you're looking for some place to moor up, it is important to include the rudder into the length overall, otherwise you will find that she won't fit necessarily in the place that you're trying to moor her. But generally speaking, when we talk about the size of a wherry, we will be talking about the size of the hull, so excluding the rudder, so that's why I talk about 48 feet. Obviously, when the rudder is attached to Lady Garnet, she'll be something more like 44 feet. I say something like because I'm not absolutely certain of what size the rudder is going to be because I haven't designed it yet. But of course, the plan is probably to lift the rudder onto the pintles after Lady Garnet has been launched. So I have a fair few years in which to figure out exactly what size the rudder is going to be, because it will be one of the last things probably that will be made. But anyway, I seem to have gone off on a tangent again because I was talking about how we're going to transfer these lines into the full size. And really, it's quite simple, because if you look closely, what we've got here in all three different views of the boat, we've got a grid. Now, if we look, for example, at the shear line, we have got these curved lines, so obviously there's the actual shear line, and then there are these four buttock lines. The straight lines that are running vertically are called the stations, and the horizontal lines are the water lines. Now, if we come down to the half-breadth plane, we see a bit of a change. The curved lines are now the water lines. The station lines are still exactly the same, and the horizontal lines are now the buttock lines. And you can probably guess what I'm going to say next. Yep, we're coming over to the body plan, and on that you can see that the curved lines are the station lines from which we'll make the station molds which the boat is built around. And the grid, the horizontal and vertical lines, are the buttock lines running top to bottom, and going side to side are, of course, the water lines. So since we have this very handy grid, it's quite easy to transfer these lines to full size. All I have to do is look in each aspect and take the curved lines and see where they intersect with the horizontal and vertical lines. Then I take those measurements and I multiply them by the common factor, which I've already figured out because I didn't think you watching me doing stuff on a calculator was necessarily the most exciting thing in the world. So I figured out that the scale is 1 millimeter on these plans equals 26 millimeters on the boat. So all I have to do is multiply everything by 26. So that includes, of course, the actual grid itself. So I'll take the measurements between the stations, multiply that by 26, and that is where I plot each of the station lines, and then the same thing with the water lines going up. And then I will fill in a table of offsets, and the table of offsets, as you probably figured out, is simply the listing of all the points in all three views where the curved lines in that particular aspect cross either the horizontal or vertical lines. Once I go and build the lofting floor, I can put the grid down full size, and then I will take those points and I will plot them, and I will run battens around. They're going to have to be very long battens, obviously, and I will get all of the lines drawn. Now, you might think to yourself, well, going from this size to the larger size, I mean, multiplying by 26, there is bound to be some error that creeps in, some discrepancy. And that's absolutely true, but we don't worry about that, because the whole purpose of lofting, as I mentioned when I was lofting the dinghy, is that you are going to iron out all of those potential little errors. So if I take a measurement on, say, station 3 and buttock 1, and I measure it and I say, oh, that's 27.5 millimeters, and in actual fact it's 27.4, but obviously it's difficult to, eye that when you're using a ruler that obviously only goes to the half mil. Well, when you multiply that by 26, it does increase the amount of error. But again, that's not a problem, because what I was taught, and again I said this when I lofted the tender for Lady Garnet, is the important thing when lofting is to remember that a fair line, which is to say a smooth curve, takes precedence over any written measurement. So if I write down all the measurements for, say, the shear line, and I go and spring a batten round, and it's hitting all the points except it's missing at station 5, well, I'm not going to force the batten to come in line with the point on station 5. What I'm going to say to myself is, the point that I've written down at station 5 is slightly inaccurate. I mean, just even the plans. I mean, these have obviously been scanned, they've been shrunk down, they've been printed off again. You're dealing with paper, which, I'm obviously trying to keep it very smooth, but there can be little wrinkles in it. So you just have to accept the fact that these plans are not necessarily perfect to the 100th of a mil, and my measurements off them also won't be perfect. But what will be perfect, or thereabouts, is the lofting of the boat, because we want those fair lines. So if a point is wrong, the lofting will show it, and we will just make that adjustment. I hope all that's making sense. If it isn't fully making sense, obviously when I actually start to do the lofting process, it will all become very clear. And it's going to be quite exciting. I have done lofting a few times, but obviously never with anything of this size. So I think it's going to be quite fun when we get around to doing that, which of course will be quite early in the process, because I can't start building the boat until I have the lofting done, because as I said earlier, I need the station molds, which I get from drawing out the body plan. So with all that said, I think the next thing is to get a sheet of paper that I have drawn a grid on, not this grid, confusing, another grid. That's the grid in which I'm going to write down the measurements for the table of offsets, and then grab a ruler, start taking the measurements, calculator, multiply everything by 26, and fill in all of those numbers. And then, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to scan that onto the computer so that way I have a digital copy as well as a hard copy, because I don't want to lose that. And then, well, then we're well on our way. After that, I'm going to do a little bit more work on the dinghy for Lady Garnet. And then the next time you see me, it'll be 2025, and I will be in a boatyard on the Thames. Can't wait. Here is a classic example of what I was talking about earlier. I've taken the measurement from the center line to station 1 on water line 3. Now, the initial measurement has come up as 26.25 mil, which obviously then will be multiplied by 26. However, if we now go to the half-breadth plan, here we have what is the center line. This is station 1, and this is water line 3. Now, this measurement here should be the same as the one we just took. It should be 26.25, but it's 27.25. So it's a mil off, multiplied by 26 mil. Is an entire inch difference. That is the kind of thing that we've got to iron out in the lofting, because these 2 points in the actual boat, these 2 measurements, will of course be the same. They have to be the same. There's no physically possible way for them to not be, because obviously when you build a boat, all the 3 views are not separate, they're combined. But as I say, when I plot this in the graph, I have to decide which one I'm going to even write down, because it's the exact same measurement, but it's, as I say, real terms, it's an inch different. So it'll be interesting to see when we come to the lofting how that gets ironed out. I'm just selecting a piece of Siberian larch for planks 15 and 16, and I just wanted to show you all what a beautiful piece of larch this is. You saw those 2 tiny knots right at the far end, but the rest of it is completely clean. And it is quite wide, so when I put the template on it, a template which you can see has been used time and time again with various alterations, I'm going to try and position it really nicely to see if I run this template along the top, whether or not I might be able to, when I do the template for the next set of planks, I might be able to get them out of the same piece. So I tend to find it a bit quicker and easier when transferring the lines off of the boat to transfer from the top edge of the plank, which of course is how you do it if you were doing carvel planking. But of course for clinker planking you have to add in the land. Now, I like to add the land on actually to the plank here, so I'll take my template that I have for the land and we'll just run that along after the fact. I just find that it's actually a bit quicker and slightly more accurate that way. The important thing is just to make sure that you remember to do it. So you'll see just here there is a hole. Well, there's quite a few holes actually in this template now, and I'm using various different methods of making sure that I know which one I'm using for this particular set of planks. So you see I've gone around this one with a square mark. Now the purpose of this is that it tells me where the top edge of the plank is. Now with the top edge I only mark at each station mold, and of course the marks are actually on the underside of the template. So when I have it laying down and I'm transferring the lower marks on, for the upper one what I do is, before I put this on, I have it the other way around. I drill a hole through, and then I can just put my pencil through and make a dot, and then you'll see when I finish and take the template off, I'll have dots at various intervals, and I will run a batten round them and get a nice fair line. for obvious reasons, there's usually a bit of a time lag between what I'm doing in the videos and when you actually get to see what I'm doing in the videos. But what you're seeing right now is basically where I am, because it's currently Friday afternoon and this video is going to be out on Saturday morning. So this is where I am on the dinghy. I put this plank on, well, I started to put it on yesterday. It was steamed, and I've put the nails in at the forward end. The rest of it's still just cramped into place, so I need to carry on with nailing this in with the copper nails and rows, as we've seen. And I've got this plank, which is underway. It's mainly shaped. I'm just putting the geralds on the forward end and then the aft end, and then that is going to be ready to be steamed in place on the starboard side. So this gives us, if I do another quick count, 8 planks each side. So this will be plank number 17 of 22. So definitely making some progress on the dinghy. Really hoping to get a bit more done over the next few days over the holidays, because, as I say, from January I can move into the tent at Tom Jones Boatyard and begin work on the wherry. And obviously there is going to be an overlap between making Lady Garnet's tender and making Lady Garnet herself, but I'd like there to be as little of overlap as possible, so I want to get as much of the dinghy done before I actually start on Lady Garnet. But that is, as I said earlier, going to be very soon. The next time you see me, I'll be at Tom Jones Boatyard, and I will be starting to work on the trading wherry Lady Garnet. I do hope you subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in 2025.